The space station hung in the darkness like a floating city, its lights blinking in the endless black. Ships came and went through its docking rings, carrying traders, smugglers, and wanderers from every corner of the galaxy. Evan's cargo ship drifted closer, guided by slow blue lights. He had been to many stations before, but this one felt different. The metal looked older, scarred from battles long past. The comms crackled with static, and the docking officer's voice was cold and impatient. When the ship locked in place, Evan stepped out into a corridor that smelled faintly of oil and smoke. Strange sounds echoed from somewhere far away, metal clanging, alien voices speaking in low tones. He adjusted the strap on his jacket and walked toward the market level. The market was loud and crowded. Holograms flashed prices. Creatures of all shapes and sizes moved between stalls. Some were tall and thin with shimmering skin, others short and covered in scales. Vendors shouted in a dozen different languages, each trying to sell rare metals, weapons, spices, and things better. Left unnamed, Evan kept his head low. He wasn't here for trouble, just supplies. But as he passed one row of stalls, a strange sound made him stop. It wasn't shouting or music. It was soft, like a tiny voice crying. He turned his head and saw a darker part of the market ahead. There, away from the noise, was a raised platform, surrounded by a crowd. On it stood a large alien with skin like cracked stone, speaking through a translator device. Behind him, in rows, were cages. Some held exotic animals, winged lizards, glowing insects. Others had strange plant creatures, twisting inside glass boxes. Evan's eyes moved from cage to cage. And then he saw her. She was small, no taller than a human child's doll. Her skin was pale silver, and her hair glowed faintly, like threads of moonlight. Her eyes, huge and bright, scanned the crowd with fear. She sat on the floor of the cage, hugging her knees, a faint shimmer of light moving over her skin. Evan felt a strange pull, as if the air around him had shifted. He couldn't look away. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the translator. Next rare specimen, fragile, do not touch, dangerous if angered. The crowd murmured, some laughing, others whispering. The girl looked at Evan for the briefest second. It was not the look of a wild animal. It was the look of someone who understood. Someone who was asking for help without words. A tall hooded figure stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. His face was hidden, but his voice was sharp. I will take her. Name your price. The auctioneer nodded and announced the starting bid. The hooded figure offered an amount that made some of the aliens gasp. It was more than Evan's ship was worth. Evan's heart pounded. This was not his business. He had no credits to waste. And yet he couldn't move. Something deep in his gut screamed that if the hooded man took her, she would be gone forever, and something terrible would happen. The auctioneer's eyes scanned the crowd. Any challengers? Without thinking, Evan raised his hand. I'll bid, he said. His voice sounded strange even to himself. The crowd turned toward him, surprised. Some laughed. Others stared. The auctioneer tilted his head. A human? Interesting. State your offer. Evan named a number high enough to make his chest hurt. The hooded figure turned slowly toward him, silent for a moment before raising the bid again. And so it began. The numbers climbed higher. Each time Evan spoke, he could feel the tension in the air. Each time the hooded man spoke, the crowd's whispers grew louder. It was no longer just an auction. It was a duel. At last, Evan spoke his final number. It was everything he had. If the hooded man went higher, Evan would have to stop. There was a long pause. The hooded man tilted his head, and for a second, Evan thought he saw a faint glow under the shadow of the hood-like eyes burning. Then, without a word, the man stepped back. The auctioneer's voice rang out. Sold to the human. The crowd murmured again. Some shook their heads, others smirked. and a few looked away as if they wanted no part in what would happen next. The cage was lowered into Evan's hands. The girl sat very still inside, her glowing eyes fixed on him. She whispered something in a language he didn't know. Her voice was soft, almost like a bell. Before Evan could say anything, a shadow fell over him. The hooded figure was standing close now, his voice low so only Evan could hear. "She is not what she seems. You will regret this." Then he turned and vanished into the crowd, leaving Evan with the cage in his hands, and a feeling that his life had just changed in a way he could not yet understand. Asterisk. Evan walked away from the auction platform with the small cage in his hands. The crowd slowly melted back into the noise of the market, but he could feel eyes still watching him, some curious, some unfriendly. The cage felt heavier than it should, not because of the girl's size, but because of what had just happened. He pushed his way through the busy stalls, trying not to look over his shoulder. The girl inside stayed quiet. She sat with her knees pulled up, the faint silver glow of her hair catching the light as they passed flickering lamps. Evan's ship was docked 3 levels up, but as he moved through the station's twisting corridors, doubt began to grow in his mind. What had he just done? He had spent everything, every last credit he owned on a stranger. Not just a stranger, but a rare alien being that other people clearly wanted badly enough to fight for. And one of those people had just warned him. "You will regret this." He could have walked away. He should have walked away. But he didn't. As he passed a long row of food stalls, the smell of spiced steam filled the air. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since morning, but he kept moving. Pausing now felt dangerous. At the end of the corridor, he found a quiet corner, half hidden behind a broken vending machine. He set the cage down carefully and crouched in front of it. The girl watched him, her bright eyes following every movement. "I don't know if you can understand me," Evan said slowly, "but I'm not going to hurt you." She tilted her head. Her lips moved slightly, but the words were soft and strange, like a melody he couldn't quite follow. Evan sighed. "Right. Language barrier." He tapped the side of the cage gently. "I'll get you out. Just not here. Too many people watching." The girl didn't answer, but something in her gaze made him think she understood more than she let on. A sudden voice broke the moment. "Nice pet you bought, human." Evan turned sharply. A group of 3 reptilian traders stood at the end of the corridor. Their eyes glinted under the station's dim lights, and their forked tongues flicked in and out as they grinned. "Rare specimen," one of them hissed. "Could sell her for double what you paid. Maybe triple." "Not for sale," Evan said firmly, lifting the cage again. They stepped closer. "Everything is for sale." Evan's grip on the handle tightened. "Not this." The reptiles exchanged a look, and then one shrugged. "Your mistake." They turned and melted back into the market crowd, but Evan's gut told him they weren't. Gone for good. He started walking again, faster now, every few steps. He scanned the reflections in the metal walls, looking for shadows that moved when they shouldn't. The station felt different now, less like a marketplace and more like a hunting ground. And he was the prey. When he finally reached the lift to the upper docks, his relief was short-lived. 2 station guards stood at the entrance, blocking the way. Their armor was dark and polished, and the strange crest on their shoulders marked them as private security, not station police. One of them raised a clawed hand. "Inspection." Evan hesitated. The girl inside the cage shifted, her eyes narrowing as if she sensed danger. The guard pointed to the cage. "That specimen is restricted property. Hand it over." "Restricted?" Evan repeated. "I bought her legally." "Not anymore," the guard said. "Orders changed." Something about his tone made it clear. This wasn't about orders. This was about the hooded man from the auction. Evan's mind raced. He could fight, but against armored guards in the middle of a busy station, that would end badly. He could hand her over and walk away, but his stomach twisted at the thought. The girl pressed her small hands against the glass, staring at him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. She didn't speak, but her eyes said enough. Don't. Leave me. Evan took a slow breath. Not happening. The guard stepped forward. Wrong answer. In one motion, Evan turned on his heel and pushed into the crowd, forcing his way through startled merchants and angry customers. Shouts rose behind him, and the heavy boots of the guards thudded on the metal floor. The market blurred around him, flashes of color, bursts of alien scents, the heat of too many bodies in too small a space. He ducked under a low-hanging sign, squeezed through a narrow gap between stalls, and burst into a side corridor. His lungs burned. The cage was heavy in his arms, and the girl clung to the bars to steady herself. The sound of pursuit was fading, but Evan knew it wasn't over. The hooded man hadn't just lost the auction, he had lost something important to him. And men like that didn't forgive. Evan pressed his back to the wall and looked at the girl again. All right, he whispered. Looks like we're in this together now. She blinked slowly, and for the first time since he had seen her, the corners of her mouth lifted, just slightly. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him moving. The docking bay was colder than the rest of the station. Evan's boots echoed on the metal floor as he hurried toward his ship. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting the hooded man or the guards to appear again. The cage in his arms seemed heavier with every step. The girl inside hadn't spoken since they escaped the market. She sat quietly, her glowing eyes fixed on him, studying him as though trying to decide if he was a friend or just another captor. When they reached the ship's boarding ramp, Evan pressed the access panel. The old cargo freighter hissed as the hatch opened, releasing a faint smell of oil and warm metal. Inside, the lights flickered to life. The hum of the engines was low and steady, like a sleeping animal. Evan carried the cage to the small crew cabin and set it down on the table. The girl shifted slightly. Her silver hair caught the light, shimmering like fine threads. Evan crouched. So they were eye level. All right, he said quietly. You're safe here, for now. Her gaze didn't waver. She spoke softly in her strange language, the sound like wind chimes in a breeze. Evan shook his head. I wish I could understand. You. He tapped the lock on the cage. It was a simple trade model, but it had been reinforced with alien tech he didn't recognize. Whoever had owned her before didn't want her escaping. Before he could examine it further, the ship's internal alarm chimed a warning from the docking bay sensors. Evan moved to the cockpit and checked the display. His stomach tightened. 3 figures were approaching the ship. 2 were in the same black armor as the guards from earlier. The third was the hooded man. Evan cursed under his breath. He returned to the cabin and knelt beside the cage. Listen, he whispered. I don't know what they want from you, but I'm not letting them take you. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she reached out, her tiny fingers touching the glass. A faint light bloomed from her skin, spreading in delicate patterns across the surface. Evan didn't understand what she was doing, but the patterns faded quickly, leaving the glass cool to the touch. She looked tired now, as if it had cost her something. Outside, heavy boots clanged on the ramp. A deep voice shouted through the hull. Open the hatch, human. We'll make this quick. Evan's mind raced. The station's rules were clear violence. Inside the docks meant heavy fines or worse. But these weren't official station guards. They didn't care about rules. He moved to the cockpit again and hit the ship's security lock. Not opening, he called back. Silence followed. And then a hiss of cutting tools. Against metal. They were forcing their way in. Evan dashed to the storage locker and grabbed the only weapon he had, a battered pulse pistol. Not much, but better than nothing. The girl was watching him with sharp focus now. She spoke again, faster this time, pointing toward the maintenance hatch in the cabin wall. You want me to hide you? He asked. She shook her head and pointed at the hatch again, then at the floor near the ship's power core. Evan frowned. You know the ship? A loud bang shook the hull. The cutting tool had pierced through. Evan didn't have time to question. He opened the hatch. The space inside was small, filled with pipes and humming cables, but she slipped through with surprising speed, vanishing into the shadows. The boarding ramp gave a final screech as the outer door tore free. The hooded man stepped in first. His face was still hidden, but Evan felt the weight of his gaze. "You've made a mistake," the man said. His voice was calm, almost kind, but the words felt like a blade. Evan raised the pistol. "So I've been told." Behind the hooded man, the armored guards moved forward. The first swung a heavy weapon toward Evan only for the ship's lights, to suddenly go out in the pitch black. A sound like a sharp crack filled the air. Sparks burst from the wall panels. One of the guards shouted in surprise. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the cabin in red glow. The hooded man was still standing, but his head turned sharply toward the maintenance hatch. "You," he hissed. Evan followed his gaze and saw the girl crawling out from the hatch, her tiny hands glowing brighter than before. The air between them seemed to thrum with energy. The hooded man took a step forward, but the girl raised her hands. A pulse of light exploded outward, slamming into the guards and sending them crashing into the walls. The man staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, he laughed a low, chilling sound. "Interesting," he said. "You've grown stronger." Before Evan could fire, the man turned and vanished in a blur of movement, retreating into the shadows outside the ship. The girl's glow dimmed. She swayed on her feet, and Evan caught her before she fell. Her voice was faint now, but this time, he thought he understood one word in her strange tongue: "Run." Evan's hands tightened around the tiny girl as the red emergency lights pulsed inside the ship. Her skin felt warm, almost buzzing, like she carried her own small sun inside her. She was breathing fast, her eyes half closed, but she kept whispering the same word: "Run." He didn't need to be told twice. Outside the hatch, boots clanged on metal. More of them were coming. Evan hurried to the cockpit and hit the launch sequence. The ship's engines roared to life, rattling the hull. But before the clamps could release, the control screen flashed a warning: "Dock lock active, remote override ENGG." His stomach sank. Someone, probably the hooded man, had locked him. To the station, the girl tugged on his jacket, pointing toward the service exit at the far end of the docking bay. It wasn't meant for ships. It was a maintenance route, narrow and half forgotten, leading into the station's underbelly. "Seriously?" Evan muttered. "You want us to go into the station when they're looking for you?" Her silver hair shimmered faintly, and for the first time she smiled, just a small, confident smile. Somewhere deep in his gut, Evan decided to trust her. He slung his old pack over one shoulder, grabbed a coil of cable, and opened the hatch on the opposite side of the ship. The air that rushed in was colder, and it carried the metallic smell of old, uncleaned vents. The corridor beyond was dark. Panels hung loose from the ceiling, and strange graffiti marked the wall's symbols he didn't recognize. The girl slipped out of his arms and landed lightly on the floor, moving with surprising speed. She didn't run in a straight line, but darted from shadow to shadow as if she knew every blind spot in the station's cameras. Evan followed, heart hammering. Behind them, distant voices echoed angry, searching. They passed through a narrow section where the walls sweated with condensation. Somewhere above, pipes hissed and dripped. The air was warmer here, heavy with the smell of machine oil and ozone. "Where are you taking me?" Evan whispered. The girl glanced back, her glowing eyes catching the dim light. She didn't answer, but her pace quickened. Suddenly, she stopped. Her head tilted, as if she were listening to something he couldn't hear. Evan strained his ears, but all he caught was the distant hum of the station's engines. Then, without warning, she darted into a side tunnel. Evan swore under his breath and chased after her. only to freeze when he saw what lay ahead. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, dimly lit by strips of dying lights. It was older than the station's main sections, and clearly abandoned. In the center stood a massive, rusted cage. Inside was another alien dot. It wasn't like the girl. This one was tall, thin, its skin stretched tight over a bony frame. Its eyes were black pits, and its long fingers wrapped around the bars as it stared at them. Evan's instincts screamed danger, but the girl walked right up to the cage and placed her hand against the bars. A faint light passed from her skin into the metal, and the alien hissed softly, as if in pain. Evan took a step forward. "What are you doing?" The girl looked back at him and shook her head, then pointed toward the far wall where a narrow maintenance shaft led upward. Before Evan could ask more, a loud clang echoed through the chamber metal boots on the floor above. The hunters had found them. The girl ran for the shaft, and Evan followed, his pulse spiking. The climb was steep and cramped, the metal rungs slippery with grease. Halfway up, he heard shouting below, and the sound of the cage door opening. He didn't look back. He didn't want to know what had just been set free. The shaft ended in a hatch that opened into a crowded loading area. Crates were stacked high, and machinery clanked as automated arms moved supplies. It was loud enough to cover their movements. The girl darted between crates, her tiny frame making her hard to spot. Evan stayed close, but every shadow felt like a threat. As they reached the far wall, the station's alarms blared. The voice over the intercom was cold and mechanical. Security lockdown initiated. All non-registered lifeforms will be detained. Evan looked down at the girl. "That's us." She met his eyes and whispered something he couldn't understand, but the tone was clear. "We keep moving." And so they did, vanishing into the chaos as the hunters closed in from every direction. The loading area was chaos. Machines rolled along the floor, lifting crates as tall as walls. The air smelled of hot metal and coolant, and the station's lockdown alarm wailed above the noise. Evan's chest burned from running, but the girl moved with the same strange grace as before, fast, but never careless. She led him toward a narrow maintenance door tucked between two stacks of cargo. Evan pressed his ear against it. Nothing. He pushed it open, and they slipped inside. The noise of the loading area faded, replaced by a low hum and the drip of water. It was a storage tunnel, long and dim, with pipes running along the ceiling. Evan set his hands on his knees and caught his breath. "All right," he said, voice low. "You've been dragging me through half this station. Now you're going to tell me why." The girl stood a few steps away, staring at the wall. Her silver hair was damp from the condensation, strands sticking to her small face. She didn't turn to him, but she spoke slowly, as if picking each word with care. "I am not from here." Evan froze. It was the first time she'd spoken in clear human words. Her voice was soft, but each word carried a weight far beyond her small frame. "I am from a dying world," she continued. "We shine light inside. U.S. Not just light you see, light that can heal or destroy." Evan's mind spun. "You're saying you're some kind of energy being?" She shook her head. "I am last of my people, others taken, used, their light burned away." Evan remembered the hooded man's words at the auction. "She is not what she seems." He remembered the way she'd blasted those guards with a pulse of light. "You're a weapon," he said quietly. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but pain. "No, I was child. My light is life. They made it into war." Evan's jaw tightened. "And now they want to take you back." She nodded once. "If they catch me, they will take all of it. No more light. No more me." Evan rubbed a hand over his face. He didn't want this. He was a traitor, a drifter. He wasn't a hero, But looking at her, he knew there was no version of this where he could walk away. Before he could answer, a faint clank echoed from somewhere behind them. He spun toward the sound. The tunnel bent around a corner, and from the shadow came a faint, steady glow. Not her glow, something else. The girl's eyes widened. "They found us." Evan drew his pistol, the weight of it suddenly too light for her. "The danger coming their way. What is it?" She took a step back, her voice trembling now. "Hunter drones. They smell the light." The glow grew stronger, and with it came a high-pitched hum that made Evan's teeth ache. They didn't have time to go back to the loading area. Too many guards there. Evan looked down at her. "All right, you're the one with the plan. Where now?" She pointed upward at a hatch in the ceiling. The metal was rusted, the bolts barely holding. Evan slung her onto his back and jumped, grabbing the hatch's handle. It groaned but gave way, revealing a narrow shaft that climbed toward the upper deck's dot as they climbed. The humming below turned into a sharp, mechanical screech. The drones had seen them, halfway up. Evan risked a glance down. 2 small machines floated into the tunnel, their round frames bristling with needles and lenses. Their lights turned from white to a hungry red. "They're fast," Evan muttered. The girl's voice was quiet in his ear. "I can stop them, but I will fall." He knew what she meant. If she used her power again, she'd burn herself out. He'd seen how it drained her before. "Not yet," he said. "Save it for when we've got no choice." They reached the top of the shaft and pushed into a wide chamber filled with tangled wires and humming engines. The drones were climbing fast now, their metal bodies scraping the walls. Evan spotted an access door on the far side. "Come on!" They ran for it, boots ringing on the grated floor. The girl stumbled once, but Evan caught her, pulling her forward. The door opened into a long, dim hallway lined with viewing windows. Through the glass, Evan could see the stars, a reminder of how close and yet unreachable freedom was. Behind them, the hatch burst open. The drones zipped through like hunting insects, their red lights sweeping across the hallway. The girl's voice came again, steady this time. "Now, no choice." She turned, her hands glowing brighter and brighter until the light hurt to look at. The drones reacted instantly, firing sharp bursts of energy, but the light swallowed the attacks before they reached her. A blinding pulse filled the hallway. The windows rattled, the floor vibrated, and then silence. When Evan opened his eyes, the drones were smoking heaps on the floor. The girl swayed, her glow fading to a faint shimmer. Evan caught her before she fell. "You weren't kidding," he said softly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Now they will send more." Evan stared out at the stars beyond the glass, jaw tightening. "Then we'd better get off this station before they arrive." The hum of the engines in the maintenance chamber was loud enough to hide their footsteps, but Evan still moved fast, keeping the tiny girl close against his chest. Her glow had faded to a soft shimmer, beautiful, but fragile, like the last ember of a dying fire. He knew she didn't have another blast of light in her, not for a while. And that meant if they were caught now, they were finished. The corridor ahead curved into a service walkway with grated flooring. Through the gaps, Evan could see the vast emptiness of the station's underbelly, miles of pipes, cables, and shadows. Somewhere far below, a dull mechanical roar echoed. Like a slumbering beast. The girl tapped his arm and pointed toward a maintenance lift at the far end. It was old, dusty, its call button flickering, but if it still worked, it could take them straight to the docking bay. They were halfway there when a voice cut through the air. "Leaving so soon?" Evan spun. The hooded man stepped out from the shadows, his cloak shifting as if alive. 2 armored guards flanked him, their weapons humming. But what made Evan's blood run cold wasn't the weapons. It was the figure crouched on the railing above them, the tall, thin alien they'd seen. In the rusted cage, its black eyes locked on the girl, and its long limbs moved with inhuman speed as it dropped to the walkway. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. The hooded man's voice was calm. "You've cost me time and money, human. Give her to me, and maybe you'll walk away." Evan's grip on the girl tightened. "Not happening." The man's chuckle was low. "I was hoping you'd say that." The alien lunged. Evan dove aside, the creature's claws tearing into the metal grating. Sparks flew. He fired his pistol, the shots punching holes in the walkway. But the alien weaved and twisted like smoke. The girl slid from his arms and darted toward the lift. Her small size made her hard to target, but one of the guards swung his weapon toward her, only for Evan to tackle him, knocking the shot off course. The second guard advanced, but a strange thing happened. The alien stopped chasing the girl and turned on the hooded man. "You promised me the light," it hissed in a voice like broken glass. The man's head tilted slightly. "And you will have it after I have what I came for." But the alien's muscles tensed. It wasn't going to wait. It lunged at the hooded man. In the chaos, Evan grabbed the girl and shoved her toward the lift. He slammed the call button, and the ancient machinery groaned to life. The platform descended with a metallic whine. The hooded man's voice rose over the fight. "Do you think you can run from me, human? There is nowhere in this system I cannot reach." Evan didn't look back. The lift clanged into place, and they jumped on. It began to descend, rattling as it dropped through layers of metal and shadow. The girl clung to the railing, her voice trembling. "He will follow." "I know," Evan said. "That's why we don't stop." But halfway down, the lift shuddered to a halt. The old machinery had given up. Above them, echoes of the fight faded, replaced by the sound of something crawling down the shaft toward them. The girl's eyes went wide. "It's him." Evan looked at her, then at the narrow drop below. It wasn't far, maybe survivable, but there was no guarantee what waited. In the dark underbelly of the station, he made the choice anyway. "Hold on," he said. He wrapped her in his jacket, took a breath, and jumped. They hit hard, rolling across a dusty metal platform. His shoulders screamed in pain, but he forced himself to stand. The girl pointed toward a half-broken hatch. They ducked through it and found themselves in a place Evan hadn't expected. The docking bay. His ship was there. Lights still on, engines still warm. But between them and the ramp, a squad of armed mercenaries, not station guards, not the hooded man's soldiers. Another player had entered the hunt. The girl's voice was almost a whisper. "They all want the same thing." Evan's jaw tightened. "Then we'll have to make sure nobody gets it." The mercenaries moved like a wall of steel, rifles up, visors glowing faintly red in the dim light of the docking bay. Between them and the ship, there was no cover, just the open floor and the cold hum of the station's generators. Evan scanned the bay. There were at least 8 of them. Too many for a straight fight. The girl clutched his sleeve, her glowing eyes fixed on the mercs. "They will not stop," she whispered. "Not until I am empty." Her words hit him harder than a gunshot. Empty. She didn't mean tired, she meant gone. He kept his voice low. "You've still got something left, right?" She nodded slowly. "Enough for one." "One?" "One to break the sky." He didn't know what that meant, but her tone left no doubt. Whatever she was planning, it would change everything. The mercenaries advanced, boots pounding in perfect rhythm. Their leader, a broad-shouldered figure with a jagged scar across his visor, stopped and raised his weapon. "Step aside, human," the leader barked. "You walk away now, and we forget this." Evan smirked bitterly. "I've heard that before." He looked at the girl. "If you do this, will you survive?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was calm. "I will live. But I will not shine for many cycles. I will be small." He crouched so they were eye to eye. "Then we make it count." Her tiny hand slid into his, warm and trembling. She stepped forward, facing the mercenaries alone. The leader laughed, muffled through his helmet. "This is your plan, a child?" The girl's glow flared soft at first, then sharp, like the rising edge of dawn. The mercs hesitated. Their visors began to glitch, static crawling across the glass. Evan took a step back, shielding his eyes. Glow became a burning sphere around her, lifting her slightly off the ground. The air trembled. The floor under their feet vibrated. Then she spoke, not in words he knew, but in a voice that seemed to echo from every wall of the docking bay. The light exploded. It wasn't fire. It wasn't heat. It was a wave that tore through the bay like a silent scream. Every weapon shorted out. Every helmet cracked. The mercenaries dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. Evan didn't wait. He scooped her into his arms and sprinted for the ship's ramp. The glow was already fading, her body limp in his grip. He didn't stop running until they were inside. The hatch slammed shut behind them, and the engines roared to life. As the ship lifted from the docking clamps, alarms wailed across the station. On the bay floor, the mercenaries staggered to their feet, but it was too late. The freighter shot out into the black. Evan eased the ship onto a steady course, the stars stretching out before them. In the co-pilot's seat, the girl lay wrapped. In his jacket, her glow almost gone, he glanced at her. "You're free now." Her eyes opened just enough to meet his. Her voice was faint but steady. "No, we are free." He didn't answer. Out the viewport, the station shrank into the distance, but something told him this wasn't over. The hooded man was still out there. Others too. The kind of people who would cross entire star systems for a piece of what she carried inside. Her. But for now they had the stars. And somewhere deep inside, Evan knew this was just the beginning.